Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about one of the hottest techniques in bass fishing right now, and that's going to be the damiki rig. If you've been watching a lot of Bass Live and MLF and all that kind of stuff this year, you know that bait absolutely dominated. It won a ton of tournaments. Everybody's been fishing this thing, and it's all because of forward-facing sonar. However, we're going to show you today that you can use this bait even without forward-facing sonar. So no matter where you fish, what kind of equipment you have, we're going to show you how to fish this bait so you can get in on the action and catching all these fish right now, as hot as this bait is, and why it's catching so many fish. So we're going to break all that down in today's video, so stay tuned and let's get right into it. All right, so before we get to fishing the damiki rig here, let's talk about rod, reel, line setup, bait setup, everything we always talk about in every video. We're going to start about the rod, reel, and line setup. This is a really simple setup. It falls in with a lot of my other techniques that I do, like the finesse swim bait, where anybody can do this technique. You probably already have the setup to do it. And this guy, all we're going to do is a 7-foot medium fast spinning rod. That's it. Super basic setup. I have a 2500 Shimano Sedona on there. I put 15-pound test lime green braid on it, and then I'll tie like an 8-pound test fluorocarbon leader on there, 10-pound test, whatever you're looking for there. That is the setup. I don't do anything else other than that. You can use a medium light if you want a little bit more give in the rod, but I actually prefer more of a backbone so that you can get a good hook set on those fish. The hooks that I pour in my damiki rig heads, they're like the owner hyper wire hooks. I don't know what they're called. I order them online and pour my own ball heads, and they have a little curved point on there. They keep the fish hooked really good, but you have to have a little bit of a backbone to get the hook set on them. So that's why I go with the medium over the medium light. Allows me to get a better hook set. 2500 gets a far enough cast if I need to. It's really basic spinning rod setup. If you have a medium action spinning rod setup or medium power spinning rod setup, you already have the deal to go ahead and fish a damiki rig. Then, like I said, I pour my own ball head jigs, so I put an owner hook in them, and I will pour them with like a 1/0 hook and use that setup. The other ones that I've tried for damiki rig setup, the Pulse Fish Lures jig heads work great for that. The swim bait head works excellent, and it has the eyeball. So I know the damiki rig, the big thing with that is having realism. So the eyeball actually probably would help in that instance if you're hanging that bait right in front of those fish and making it not do anything. I've used the VMC Moon Eye jigs, and I think that might be it. So those are really the only ones that I've ever tried. I either use my own that I've poured, paint them white to make them a little bit more realistic. You could probably just throw a black dot on there and it would look like an eyeball. Or I use either the Pulse Fish or the VMC jig heads. 1/4 ounce is where I start. If you're fishing in some pretty shallow water, a 3/8 is like the standard go-to for what most people fish with the damiki rig, and then the 1/2 ounce, if you need to get your bait really down deep, that's another one that people will fish a lot as well. So those are the 3 sizes that you should have for your damiki rig to make sure you're getting your bait in the right depth and where you need it to be. And then for bait selection, there's a few options out there. So the Z-Man Streaks 375 is a very standard one. That's like almost a 4-inch bait. So if you want something just a little bit bigger, that's really where I'll go there. I know you can get some even bigger baits if you need to. That one, anything in a bait fish color is what you're looking for. So the deal, any of like your straight whites, your smoky shads, anything like that is an excellent choice for bait fish color. The Baby Z2 is like my go-to. That's if I want like my standard damiki rig. Baby Z2 in like some type of bait fish color is what I'm going to use 99% of the time. And then if I want a smaller profile, or I know the bait's smaller, I've actually started using the Great Lakes Finesse drop minnow. That's an excellent one as well. Fits perfectly up on the damiki rig head, and then it has a little tiny little tail that's like a pintail, and it has a little bit of quiver action to it. So that one's been pretty good to me as well. That's actually what we're going to be using in today's video. Before we head out on the water, let's real quick talk about why this bait works so well lately. We'll talk about the live scope, no live scope thing when we're actually out on the water showing you how to fish it. But ultimately why this bait works so well is it just mimics bait fish much more natural than anything else. And with a lot of fish getting pressure, especially with live scope now, when they're fishing, the big thing is that you're seeing guys use this with live scope in conjunction, and it's because it's so realistic on how bait moves. It just glides through the water and swims It doesn't dart and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's just getting people more bites when they're fishing for those fish on live scope. Instead of trying to get them to react to something, it's easier to get those fish to bite when they see it. However, if you don't have live scope, you can still utilize that because that's what bait fish swim like. So you can use that bait and have a more realistic profile in some pressured bodies of water, as long as you're fishing the bait correctly and where you need to. So let's head out on the water. We're gonna break all that down and show you actually how and where to fish this bait without live scope, how to use it with live scope, and catch some fish along the way. So let's get back out on the water and do some fishing with the damiki rig. All right, so now that we talked about this bait, how and why it works, everything you need to know about the rod and reel setup, we're gonna fish this thing around and see if we can catch us a couple fish on it. Now, first thing that I'm gonna mention, we're gonna talk about the live scope deal. So yes, you can fish this with live scope. I can take my bait and physically pitch it out right in front of my boat, watch it go down in the water column on my live scope, and reel it in right over the tops of these fish and make sure I'm catching them. While that is excellent for catching suspended fish, I'm gonna give you probably one of my favorite analogies with live scope here. That is like a power drill. You could still put a screw into a wall with a screwdriver. It's just a little bit harder than if you had that. So yes, this is easier. I can line up on a fish, throw it right at it, and catch that fish, especially when they're suspended or swimming out in the middle of the lake. A lot of times these fish will suspend just over top of the cover you're already catching them on. So if you're catching them on a Carolina rig or whatever it might be, and you're not catching them on that spot anymore, they might just be suspended right in that same area. So then what I'm gonna do, I have a 1/4 ounce jig head, and this is where some practice is gonna come in, and that's why it's just a little bit harder. I know that I can throw this out there and let it sink. So what I will do, I know it's about 10 foot of water over there. I'll throw that thing over there. I actually just casted all the line off my reel, so that's not very good. I'll make sure I have some on there. I'm gonna let that sink down and I'm gonna count. I didn't do it on this cast, but I would literally count and watch my lime green braid go out. I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, see how long it takes to get down that 10 foot of water. And then you know that's how many feet it sinks per second. You can divide that and do the math on it. So if it took 10 seconds to get down and it's 10 foot of water, it's 1 foot per second. So if you wanna just play around with where those fish are in your water column, it's gonna take some practice again to figure out where they're at in the water column, but you can throw it out there and you can put it, hang on, I already got a fish. This is why you need this technique. I cannot believe that. This is why it's the hottest technique in bass fishing right now. That fish literally ate that immediately. Is it a big one? It's pretty decent. Let me grab him. And then we'll talk about what I was saying there about counting down and playing around with the depths of the water the fish are in. So very interesting call out here as well. This fish actually is hooked underneath the chin outside the mouth. Obviously I didn't snag this fish because I couldn't see it, but that means that that fish came down for that bait. So it could have literally sank right in front of his face and he went down to get it because he was already suspended in the water column. So super cool there. Sometimes the fish will give you clues like that on how they're sitting in the water. Like that one probably was suspended. So that's not a bad fish at all, but we're gonna throw him back and show you actually how to fish the damiki rig, not catching fish laying on the bottom. Okay, so now you have that information of that bait sinks 1 foot per second. There's a couple things you can do with that. If you know the fish are like 5 foot, you can cast it out there, let it sink 5 seconds, and reel it back in slowly. This bait has no action. The reason this works so well is because these fish are getting a ton of pressure, especially with the forward-facing sonar thing. So if you throw something like a big paddle tail swim bait, it stands out a lot. When you throw this little tiny 3-inch minnow that just looks like a little minnow swimming through the water and doesn't have a lot of tail movement, just a little bit of wiggle, a little bit more natural. So it can get you a little bit more bites that way. So you just reel it straight back in through the water like that. That's all you do with the damiki rig. I know a lot of people, you see people 40 foot of water, this is where that plays a lot, but you'll drop it straight underneath the trolling motor, watch it go down to right above the school of fish and just hover it in front of them like this. You've seen that probably at the Bassmaster Classic, Jeff Gustafson doing that. However, with the forward-facing sonar, now people are actually casting it out and reeling it over the top of their heads, and it'll catch them that way too. So let's throw this thing back out there. We're gonna let that thing sink back down, and then I'm just gonna slowly reel this over the top of those fish's heads, and then they should just bite it almost like a swim bait, a finesse swim bait. So we're gonna let that sink back down, and then I'm just gonna start a slow retrieve with it. And depending on the weight of your jig head will determine how fast you have to retrieve it to keep it over the tops of the heads of the fish. I have a 1/4 ounce on today. We got quite a little bit of current in the river. And also I want to keep it down closer to the bottom. Like, I'm keeping it within 1 or 2 foot of the bottom. These fish probably are not going to be suspended very much, even though that one might have been just up above a rock pile. With the amount of current and how cold this water is, those fish are going to sit pretty close to the bottom today. So we're going to throw that back out there. I would like to get a much further cast than that, but I need to re-spool this real badly, as you can tell. But literally probably the last trip out this year, so I'm not going to waste time spooling up some line when I can do it over the winter. So now we'll go ahead and start our retrieve again and just reel it in nice and slow. And you can reel sideways and sweep into them hook set that way. You can reel up vertically this way and just straight up hook set on them. That really doesn't matter as long as you have a light wire sharp hook. It does not matter how you hook set on these fish. You don't want to like smack them like that. But it doesn't matter if you do a light hook set, if you just do a sweep to the side, whatever your preference is. Not a whole lot there. It's more in the rod and that light wire hook. It'll just load up with the fish on it anyway for you. So we'll throw that back out there, let that sink down. I see I'm just about on the bottom there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start a slow retrieve. And anytime you feel that your bait has left the bottom, if you want it to be on the bottom or sink a little bit, there's one right there. He ate it as soon as that sank like 1 centimeter. So you can see you can do that as well. And then I just set the hook into him like I did. I just leaned upwards on him. If that bait, like I was saying, if that bait comes up off the bottom too much and you know that you're above the heads of the fish, you want it like right in their face. So you can just let it sink a little and watch your lime green braid go out. And as soon as I did that, my bait was probably too high over the fish because I'm fishing this point that dips off in the back. My bait was probably too high over them. I dropped it and it fell down in that depression, and as soon as it went back to their eye level, he just go ahead and grabbed it. So this is another decent fish right here. We're gonna go ahead and get him up in the boat. I'm gonna break a rod doing that one day, but not today. There we go. So the damiki rig. Why is it the hottest technique in bass fishing right now? Well, that's proof right there. They cannot resist this thing. Let's fix you here. That's proof right there on why the damiki rig is probably one of the hottest techniques in bass fishing right there, especially for smallmouth, but it works for largemouth and definitely spotted bass as well. That's a huge player on spotted bass. So smallmouth and spotted, those are the two like main species. They can't resist that thing. If you'd like to see another bait that you can fish almost like that finesse swim bait, go ahead and check that video out right there. Hit that like button down below if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming up. Thanks for watching.